Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. Now, we've had a lot of movies come out in the last couple of weeks, so I'm throwing in a couple of these bonus episodes to make sure we have all the movies covered. So on this bonus episode, we have 4 brand new films to cover this week on the show. A Bond, a Pledge, a Commitment tells the story of Sergeant Jon Kinley and interpreter Ahmed, and the fight for survival in Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Every Day is Hump Day from the creators of Super Troopers comes Hulu's original Quasi. The telling of an incredible figure in history comes the story of composer, activist, athlete, musician in the 18th century, Joseph Bologne in Chevalier. And finally, from his darkest fears comes the greatest adventure in Beau is Afraid. Now we have a lot to cover on this episode, so let's get right into it. Ready for my verdict? Let's go.
Out of the windows, what? A roar and a bursting of flame.
The Movie Wire podcast.
We just need people like me.
Podcast for hot and trending movies.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Following the sudden death of his mother, a mild-mannered but anxiety-ridden man confronts his darkest fears as he embarks on an epic Kafkaesque odyssey back home in Beau is Afraid.
I am so sorry for what your daddy passed down to you. But I wanted a child, the greatest gift of my life.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
Hi, Carrot. It's Mom. I'm just calling to say that I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. You're my angel, and I love you. Okay. I love you. Okay, bye, sweetie. I love you.
Are you at the airport?
I'm on my way. It's not safe, is it? What do you think I should do?
I'm sure you'll do the right thing, sweetheart.
Welcome back.
I hit you with my car.
What?
I know.
What is this?
That's my little assistant health monitor. Feeling sad about going home, Beau? Must feel totally unreal.
I'm supposed to be leaving.
I don't know if that's gonna happen.
You will walk many miles. Dozens will become hundreds. Hundreds will become thousands. Your adventures will continue for years and years.
I just need to get home.
I know.
Do you want the truth now?
Now, you know when you have such a vivid nightmare that when you wake up, you just can't seem to shake it, and in a way, places a shadow on the rest of your day. The first half of Beau is Afraid is like this, where it places a shadow against your mental state while you're watching it, and you know you're not having a good time and you have an unsettling feeling in your gut, but what you're viewing catches your breath, holds onto it, and you can't seem to blink nor turn away from the screen of what you're watching. Beau is Afraid is based on a short film entitled Beau from the director and writer of Hereditary and Midsommar, Ari Aster. This is a filmmaker that I think I have said in the theater, what in the actual fuck, more times than any other filmmaker consistently. Beau is Afraid affected me a lot more than Aster's previous films because he tackles an issue that is more relatable to a lot of viewers surrounding social expectations and mental health. And he does so in an extreme but respectable way through his own visions. Aster's visions are completely abstract horror with an uncomfortable message that doesn't go for an external fear, but rather goes right to the core of your psyche to bring out internal fears using behavioral traits and or a state of mind to make viewers squirm in their seats. And right at the right moment, he knows where the audience will be holding their breath and he has your attention. He then lets loose in traumatic themed chaos. The film stars Joaquin Phoenix as Beau, a very damaged man who suffers extreme anxiety with an obvious fear of his mother or an underlying fear of guilt towards his mother that Aster takes the audience along with Beau in his self-discovery. Now, the movie is never completely clear on what it is trying to do or what the ending result will be during its runtime, other than we are on an obvious journey of self-discovery with Beau, with an extraordinary vision by Aster with an incredible details to his settings and scenes, that with a 3-hour runtime, I could take a couple weeks to a couple months to dissect everything that Aster puts in. Now, if you are a type that likes to dissect and take a film apart to catch every meaning, every symbolic item or piece, it can be a sensory overload. And if you attempt to do so in a single viewing, you might find yourself frustrated with this film. There is a lot of themes and symbolism to Beau is Afraid, so much that it will most definitely divide audiences down the middle. This is one of those films, and Aster is one of those filmmakers that is an acquired taste, and this film is his most ambitious one to date. So ambitious it takes over 3 hours to get the point across, and after we get past the first half, the second act reminded me of watching a video in school, and after it's done, listening to a lecture by the teacher to dissect it. Beau is Afraid loses a lot of what made the first half so special and ends up being a long-winded lecture, with a payoff that will make some say after 3 hours of this mental journey, that's the best you got. But before I get into that, let me just say, there is a very important message in this film, and the ending result will sum it up for you. And again, I won't reveal what that is, but the ending isn't the problem here. It's the fact the film feels so long-winded, the ending result feels like a less important message rather than Aster over-explaining his pure, raw thoughts on screen. And to a limit, there is nothing wrong with that if that's your vision. But if your goal is to portray an important message as you're attempting to do, over-explaining to the point of 3 hours can be mentally exhausting, and viewers will tend not to view the point you're trying to make as important as it should be. Beau is Afraid could have been 45 to an hour shorter than what we got, and it would have had a bigger impact on the final result than what we got. Now, the cast is fantastic here. Joaquin Phoenix was made for this role, as we saw his full range from portraying the Joker and how committed he is into these types of roles. Besides Phoenix, the entire ensemble does utterly amazing, including Amy Ryan from Lost Girls, Birdman, Escape Plan, and Bridge of Spies, and the delight to always see come across the big screen, Nathan Lane, which is an odd role choice for him, but he absolutely nails it. Now, Ryan and Lane play a married couple that take Beau into their home after an accident. This is where the film transitions to in-your-face symbolic chaos, but then the pacing slows down, and this ends up being Beau's first stop on his journey of discovery. This is where the film will tempt the audience to really try and figure out what the hell is going on and where the hell this movie is going. But again, rest assured, you still have like 2.5 hours to go. So relax. This is a movie about a journey. Don't try and figure everything out within the first half of the movie. Just go along with what you're seeing. The movie is also full of a cast that have so many familiar faces in it that will make you want to point at the screen and go, oh, that's so-and-so. This in a way was a smart move by the filmmakers and casting directors Julie Brenton and Jim Carnahan. It almost acts like a mental break during the runtime to give the audience almost a mental breather. Beau is Afraid is ambitious, emotionally and mentally effective to what Esther is trying to do. It's a movie that will most definitely split viewers down the middle, and when it comes to a film like this, some just won't get it, some might find it hard to mentally watch, some will be engulfed by its intent. I enjoyed Beau is Not Afraid, but by the time we get to the climax, I felt mentally exhausted. But I have a feeling this film will get better with age as viewers start to dissect it and give it multiple viewings, and really start to appreciate what Esther was trying to do. But as a first-time watch, I'm giving Beau is Afraid 3 stars. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, there has been a lot that dropped for streaming this week. Make sure you check out my reviews on previous episodes for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now. Now available. Who Needs Heroes When You Have Thieves in Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which journeyed its way to 3 stars. Sucks to Be Him in the story of Dracula's assistant in Renfield, which didn't suck at all, receiving 3 stars. Russell Crowe stars as the Vatican's leading exorcist in The Pope's Exorcist. That was hell to sit through, receiving 1.5 stars. From Suburban Mom to Mafia Don in Mafia Mama, which should have been whacked, receiving 1.5 stars. 2 old friends reconnect at a funeral and decide to get revenge on the widower who messed with them decades before in Moving On, which should have stayed buried at 1.5 stars. And finally, the story of the first African American to play in the NBA, who started with the Harlem Globetrotters. And not only the worst movie of the year, but one of the worst true story film adaptations I have ever seen, in Sweetwater, which received 1 star. You can find those reviews on my previous episodes, and just a reminder, if you haven't yet, make sure you hit follow or subscribe, and don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. And make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. Now it's that time of year again in the Seattle area where we have the Snohomish Film Festival. You can now submit your film no matter where you're at by going to www.filmfreeway.com/Snohomish Film Festival. We have had a lot of great talent and a lot of great films. Don't wait to the last minute to submit. I cannot wait to see your movie. Based on the true story of composer Joseph Bologne, the illegitimate son of an African slave and French plantation owner who rises to the heights in French society as a composer before an ill-fated love affair in Chevalier.
Welcome to Paris, Joseph.
Monsieur, I fear this will not be a kind place to such a boy.
The boy has talent, but one in particular that is exceptional.
Very well.
I realized the more I excelled, the less I was alone.
Were you always so competitive?
The show-off who spoiled Mozart's concert.
May I play with you, monsieur?
Well, I hope this won't be embarrassing for you. Who the hell is that?
You are quite a remarkable man, Joseph. I, Marie Antoinette, Queen of France, hereby anoint you Chevalier.
In any other country, a man of your color would not be wearing such fine clothes.
One day, the whole world will know me. And of course, the music will be spectacular. Bold.
You don't belong here. You're a party trick. You're a pet, playing the violin, that is all.
You know I am the best.
You are playing a dangerous game, friend.
You forget your place, boy.
Break his hands.
This world is painful for us, my son. But there is always the choice to fight.
I'm putting on a concert. Let us fund the revolution.
You cannot afford to make any more enemies.
France is changing.
You could be more leveraged.
If you take to the stage, you will be erased. There will be no new France. You cannot topple what has been ordained by God.
Not everything's about you people.
Now, Joseph Bologne is an intriguing figure of our history that has a story that was destined and deserved to be told. Bologne was a musician, composer, activist, athlete, and a remarkable fencer, all during the time of slavery and discrimination of the 18th century, under the rule of Marie Antoinette. Bologne, who focused more on a Baroque style with African music integration, added a uniqueness and what we would call crowd-pleasing music today. Now, with a lot of Bologne's music thought to be destroyed and lost forever, has been found in the recent years, and it has been performed, which you can also listen on the soundtrack, which is one of the best aspects of this film. Chevalier is based on a true story, not just to inspire, and that's not the intent, but rather to educate, not paint a pretty picture of any of the characters, but rather the human element of mistakes, flaws, selfishness, jealousy, anger, and a struggle to where we think we stand based on our talents or privileges in social society. Now, a lot of this character in this story is based, of course, on interpretation and can be considered loosely based on Joseph Bologne's life. There is a lot more to take away from this movie than just having it based on a true story, and even dabs into the theme of learning from our past histories and what we took away and where we are at as a social society today. Are we that much different than where we were in the 18th century compared to now when it comes to political status, social status, and overall power? Now, the opening scene to Chevalier is not only a subtly humorous one, but one of the more memorable ones that I have seen this year to kick off a first act, where we go back to the 18th century to a packed theater attending a Mozart concert, where we have Mozart stop and ask audiences for requests. One attendee requests Violin Concerto No. 5. This is where we see a battle of validity of each other's skill. It plays off like an origin story before an origin story, where it plays like defeating a major villain or player before the film starts, which leads to the spark of Bologne validating his ability. It's a wonderful scene and a brilliant way to kick off the film. Chevalier was written by Stephanie Robinson, the writer of the TV shows What We Do in the Shadows and Atlanta. This is her biggest project to date, and she definitely took on a project and story that has a lot to cover with a lot of material and numerous themes to focus on or even pick from. It would be so easy to get lost in the material to make it come across stale or read like a history report. Robinson does, for the most part, a fantastic job with her screenplay. It has enough edge to keep the viewer engaged while delivering an interesting view of Bologne, and again, we can sense that Robinson's take on Bologne is open for interpretation, as most characters in true stories are. But here it is a little more obvious. The strength versus confidence versus conceited can be a little off balance and unclear on where she wanted her take on Bologne to go. But when it comes to the entertainment value, it is there with enough historical aspects to take something away. The first half of Chevalier, Robinson's dialogue seems to be on point with a proper balance, but as we get into the last half of the film, it tends to lose a little bit of focus and simplistic when it comes to the spoken words. But we have more conflicts in the story that requires more dialogue, and when we are seeking out more dialogue for context, we get left short. And this is more dominant in the second half of the movie. It's like Robinson was writing a history report, stayed up all night, and we can tell when she was starting to get a little sleepy finishing it. Chevalier was directed by Stephen Williams, and again, this is his biggest release to date as well, with previous TV projects such as Watchmen, Ray Donovan, How to Get Away with Murder, and a personal favorite, Lost. The direction on this comes across safe and exactly what you would experience as watching something on TV. There is really nothing special that stands out when it comes to what you see on screen. It's almost like a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to the music and performing scenes. We have these beautiful mid-century theaters, beautiful costume designs, and a massive orchestra, and Williams doesn't take advantage of these surroundings. The direction is not inviting to the audience to what we see on screen. I wanted the camera to swoop around and take me on a tour. I wanted an aerial view. I wanted to see the orchestra. I wanted to be in those theater. I wanted to be engulfed into the music and the environment. But Williams takes the intimate route by staying up close and personal with the camera and his characters, which was a missed opportunity to telling a story in a unique setting. What really stands out in the film and stays with you is the amazing performances by Kevin Harrison Jr. as Bologne, Sarah Weaving as Marie Josephine, and Lucy Boynton as Marie Antoinette. Now, the love affair between Joseph Bologne and Marie Josephine during this era is a curious one, and the film's second half does surround the film's motivations around these. But given the discrimination, racism, sacred view on marriage, political and social status, the film teases at that I felt should have had a heavier impact on the result. During these heavy topics during the 18th century, I feel like we should have gotten more than just cliff notes, where we kind of focus a little bit here and there on these topics, but then there's so much to cover, it never focuses on one thing. We just get a brief summary on dialogue between these characters, and we don't get invested in the conflict that we see on screen. And as the film attempts to cover all these traits and all these conflicts, we end up with a bloated second half where we have way too much to cover and prove, and it ends up flatlining. The consequence from this love affair we do see, but the danger of what if we are caught isn't present during the affair. This makes it a little frustrating because the chemistry between Harrison and Weaving are solid here. Same goes with Marie Antoinette's relationship. Harrison and Boynton's relationship as the artist and the queen is the most curious one and entertaining one. I feel there could have been a movie just surrounding the relationship of these two and the added social, political, and discrimination topics surrounding these two characters. But let's talk about the best aspect of the movie, the music. This is where the composer Chris Bowers nails it, with fantastic tie-ins, nods, and arrangements that really complements not only our composer, but the tone of the movie perfectly, and introduces audiences to this historical figure that for the most part has been forgotten or not known. Chevalier, for what it is a valiant and brave attempt to bring Joseph Bologne to the big screen for audiences to witness. The film teases greatness in the first half of the movie in terms of an attempt of style, finesse, and a character that we want to follow to see where he evolves. But by the time we get to the second half, there are so many things going on in the film we don't know what to focus on, and it gives us just brief snippets of context clues for the audience to fill in the blanks with what we would want to have seen and what we wished we would have seen. I'm giving Chevalier 2.5 stars. Now, one of my favorite things to do is to drop in with one of my favorite cinema podcasts and cinema podcast hosts, and that's Antonio over at the Cultworthy Podcast, to help cover a set of forgotten films or movies that deserve another watch or discovery. This is the first time we're doing a two-parter where we discuss dramatic animated tunes. The second and final installment to this two-parter is now live. In the final episode in this two-parter, we cover The Last Unicorn and Rock and Rule, two fantastic movies that deserve a watch if you have not yet seen it. And make sure you tune in and take a listen to yet another fascinating conversation between the Movie Wire and the Cultworthy. As always, it was a fantastic time on the Cultworthy, and make sure you follow or subscribe to the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. If you haven't tuned into part 1, make sure you do, and you don't want to miss the conclusion to our Dramatic Tunes episode. The link will be in the description of this episode. And lastly, but definitely not least, each week I look forward to a podcast that really tends to get me to unwind and get my mind off of work, either during my lunch break or an ice-cold beer when I get home. It's full of stories and laughs that only these two can tell. And that's J&K over the My Workplace podcast. Make sure you follow or subscribe to their show. The link will also be in the description of this episode. Now let's hear from J&K now.
Working can be such a drag, but it's a necessary evil.
What better way to combat the woes of the working world than to commiserate with your fellow man?
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kay.
And we're the hosts of My Work Life, a comedy podcast where we share people's stories from the workplace.
Whether they're funny, weird, scary, or just plain messed up, they're always entertaining and may leave you thinking you don't have it so bad after all.
Available on all major podcast platforms. Give us a listen. Your sanity may just depend on it.
During the war in Afghanistan, a local interpreter risks his own life to carry an injured sergeant across miles of grueling terrain in Guy Ritchie's The Covenant.
John, you have tallies approaching.
You still don't remember a thing.
I don't remember any of it.
I only remember the interpreter. Why you want this job?
I need the money.
Don't disappoint. Turn out to be a pain in the ass.
No, not me, sir.
Money isn't the reason he wants this job.
The Taliban killed his son.
Stop the vehicle, Sergeant.
We don't want to go down this road.
You're out of your bounds, Ahmed. You're here to translate.
Actually, I'm here to interpret.
John, you have tallies approaching.
This family believed you were dead. We owe that man your life.
There wasn't enough for him to carry me across those mountains. Now he's hiding in a hole somewhere. I should be in that hole.
You could stand me up at the gates of hell.
Everything all right, John? No, everything's not all right. There is a hook in me. Ahmed and his family are in trouble.
We can't intervene.
I am gonna have to get him out myself.
Listen, you're gonna be alone. You gotta adapt. This is what you got.
If you can give me the location, if I can get him out of the country. It's too dangerous. You'll become very popular with the Taliban.
I miss you. Love you, Daddy. Love you, Daddy.
You think if I could be free of this debt, I wouldn't be? You think I have a choice? There is no choice.
No, I won't back down.
Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim play Sergeant Jon Kinley and Ahmed, American soldier and Afghan interpreter. That is one of many that the U.S. hired during the war in Afghanistan with promises of U.S. visas to get out of the country. The film is supposed to be an action thriller that's not based necessarily on a true story, but rather different stories and experiences of soldiers and interpreters pieced together to make one story. And even though this is defined as an action thriller, there is something very chilling and a sense of fear that ran through me while watching The Covenant. Now, whether or not this was Guy Ritchie's intent or the fact we have spent the last 2 decades seeing the war in Afghanistan, or it just seems like yesterday we had the withdrawal from Afghanistan and saw the rise of the Taliban once again. This is the type of movie that many might have different emotions run through their body while watching. But the roller coaster of different emotions that the film triggers is almost an out-of-body experience that can be thrilling but will still send a sense of chill down your spine. This year, I've also reviewed another Guy Ritchie film, Operation Fortune, and The Covenant is a change of pace of tone from that film, and a matter of fact, most of his films. But Ritchie, with his work from the last 15 years, is starting to show his range of visions when it comes to the material he directs. While the feel and the tone, we see a gentle touch of Ritchie, but what I can appreciate about the way Ritchie tells a story is the fact he doesn't stay safe with the same comfortable style that we see from a lot of filmmakers. He adjusts his direction in terms of how the current story should be told, and when it works, we can feel how well it works. And in this film, it works extremely well. Guy Ritchie also helped pen this screenplay alongside previous collaborators Ivan Atkinson and Marn Davies from Operation Fortune, Wrath of Man, and The Gentleman. The dialogue does go through the motions and it moves the film along. There really isn't a lot to build upon between our 2 main characters, Sergeant Kinley and Ahmed, but rather the actions that they do. More specifically, Ahmed. And this is where Ritchie's choice of style and the editing keeps the film moving at a brisk pace, but we don't get a lot of substance when it comes to the relationship or build-up between Sergeant Kinley and Ahmed, except some scenes of conflict between them, in which we go through the buildup of these conflicts between them in multiple scenes of not each one understanding each other, but rather an underlying respect for one another. And it is an earned respect that we can feel as an audience, and these characters crescendo these actions until we are led to the moment that we are faced with the situation of Sergeant Kinley and Ahmed are left stranded and only have to rely on each other. The scene leading up to this is extremely effective on building tension and suspense, even though we know what the outcome is going to be from the trailers. The problem that we have with this film is that it takes a lot of build-up without a lot of built-up chemistry between the characters. And when we finally get to the second half of the film, where we find our 2 main characters out in seclusion, avoiding the dangers of the elements and the Taliban, the film tends to rush itself, and this does work to an extent where it does give the audience a brisk pace and edge-of-your-seat feelings in the moment. But as viewers may look back to a feeling that they might have wanted more of that danger element instead of the buildup that actually lacked buildup. And by the time we get to see what we saw in the trailers of Sergeant Jon Kinley going back to Afghanistan to save Ahmed, this is where the movie loses its pacing and almost feels unnecessary. Or Ritchie and his team of writers felt like they needed to throw in an ending to satisfy the audience. And don't get me wrong, the ending is satisfying to a limit, but it falls into the trap of what we got in the beginning, a bonkers balance of pacing. The beginning starts off as a brisk walk, the middle is consistently jogging, and the ending is running as fast as as it can. I felt like I was in the middle of a game of red light, green light. But what really helps us forget a lot of these flaws, the film has an outstanding performance by Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim, who doesn't necessarily lack the chemistry, but really don't have the material to build. And you can tell these two do the best they can given the material that they have, and it comes across as a professional respect character element that uses the actions of these characters to make their performance believable. Gyllenhaal and Salim have elements of subtle humanity towards each other, who many would find in an impossible situation. And this is enough to show the soul humanity in war-torn times of our ugly history. And this is what I'm going to applaud Richie for doing, is that we take so many movies, media, and content that just gives us a focus on the horrors of war within our brave U.S. soldiers. Richie brings humanity into the mix, where we focus not just on waving around a U.S. flag, but rather in equal respect to both sides, including Afghan people that fought against the Taliban, and the threat of death that were brought to these brave people for not just helping the United States, and the utter terror and threat of death that were brought to these brave people for just helping the United States. In the time of crisis or war in human nature, we tend to look inward at our own self-well-being, and where we live and forget to look is out on the outside. This is where we build stereotypes, assumptions, selfishness. Richie brings the Afghan people that fought with the U.S. to the spotlight to show what exactly these people had to risk and sacrifice on their own soil, with a focus of what these people would do to protect and hope to guarantee a life for their own families. This message was flawlessly executed by Richie, Atkinson, and Davies. The Covenant has many flaws surrounding it. Most notable is the balance between the acts and not a lot of substance in the buildup. But with that said, Richie creates one story from many stories. He creates an environment to put the audio to our eyes when it comes to the scenery and seclusion. He creates a setting that will bring chills and thrills throughout our body. It's filled with edge-of-your-seat moments, and even though it isn't a direct true story, it still brings us into this war with a bigger focus on just not what dangers our soldiers endured, but the Afghan people that gives a look to the bigger picture. In a way, this is a very important film to watch for the mere humanity and the willingness to show the hero story from not just one side, but from both sides of the spectrum. I'm giving The Covenant 3 stars. It's so hard to keep track and even have time to read all the trending topics on the web. Now there's a new app to help with all of those problems. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin. You can even follow Kardashian. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you out loud. And guess what? They have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. The Movie Wire is now a featured podcast on the Newsly app. Download and use Newsly for free now. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also use one of my promo codes that you will find in the description as well to get you a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, download Newsly today. A hapless hunchback who yearns for love and finds himself in the middle of a mysterious feud between the Pope and the King of France, when each orders the hunchback to kill the other. In the Hulu original movie, streaming now is Quasi.
Medieval France, a time that ushered in a new era of nobility.
Have another guard kill that one.
Yes, sire.
I'm sorry, who?
Kill him.
No, I couldn't, my lord. I have known Arnaud my entire life. We came up together as squires.
Would it be easier if we got a third guard to come in and kill both of these guys?
Oh, whoops, here we go. Good work.
Hey.
Quasi! 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 Holy shit, come on, we're gonna be late. You know what your problem is? Is it that I've got a fatty deposit the size of a giant gourd on my back? Oh.
Freak! Hunchback.
Morning.
I found myself just looking worthy of my best intentions.
The Royal Torture Chamber.
Back to the daily grind.
You guys psyched for Pope Week?
Oh my God, here we go. Another
Pope Week. I love Pope Week.
Who wants to see an exorcism? Welcome to the Papal Lottery. Winner of the lottery shall have his private confession heard by the Pope himself.
Quasi, you won.
Hunchback, no. Do you have any idea the questions he'll have for me?
Holy Father, can you fix my hump? Is not my very existence proof there is no God?
I don't want to get into that whole hornet's nest.
Quasi, Quasi, Quasi.
Are you going to ask for a new back?
Oh, yeah, like a tall back, maybe?
Or perhaps a new face?
No mom would like that face. They'd be like, put it back in my vagina.
Okay.
On 420. tale of love.
I very much like your rat.
And I yours.
Betrayal. And scandal.
Quasi, these are actual depictions of the Pope having sex with Saracen women.
Oh, mon Dieu. Is that mud?
It's not mud. It's not mud.
Everyone plays a part. Or two.
Send a warning shot. Shoot over the heads.
Yes, my lord.
Michelle!
Whoops!
I said shoot over the heads.
I'm not even sure that was my arrow.
I saw it come out of your crossbow.
You know what? That was Gregor's.
Gregor!
From Super Troopers Club Dread Beer Fest to Slam and Salmon, and now they take on Quasimodo in the new original comedy, Quasi. Now, this is what I appreciate about Broken Lizard when it comes to their movies, is they always know exactly not who they are, but what kind of film they want to make, and they recognize their audience. But even more so, they always look energized on screen together as they're having a blast during shooting. The energy always tends to transfer to the audience when it comes to the fun factor, but there is something missing from Quasi that takes away from the fun factor. And no, it's not the cast, it's not the direction, it's the fact we don't get to see it with a handful or crowd of strangers in a movie theater to laugh alongside. But let's get this out of the way first. In no way is Quasi a good nor great, in no way a cinematic masterpiece. And my expectations were set at the same level as when I saw Super Troopers, Beer Fest, Club Dread, etc., etc. I had a couple drinks ready with a bowl of popcorn, and I was getting ready to laugh and just be entertained. Now, Quasi brings back the normal cast we usually get: Steve Lemmy as Quasi, Kevin Heffernan as Quasi's best friend, Jay Chandrasekhar as King, and Paul Soter as Pope Cornelius, with a script by Chandrasekhar, Steve Lemmy, and Kevin Heffernan, with Heffernan taking the stab at the director's seat this go-around. Now, of course, if you have never seen a Broken Lizard movie, or this is your first go-around, you might be a little disappointed, and if you are like me, you enjoy the absurdity of these movies and just turning your brain off with a couple of drinks to laugh and relax, again, some of you might be disappointed with this one as well. Quasi is a great premise for these guys to be in a unique setting with their comedy and have a good 90-minute romp in a placement that we have never seen them before. But sadly, we do lose a little bit of comedy spark from this one. Not only that, but we lose a theater with a handful of moviegoers that are there for the same exact reason you are, to laugh with an audience of strangers. Now, the one thing I can appreciate about Quasi is the mere simplicity of the production value, from Steve Lemmy's obvious intentional crooked jaw to the costume design where it looks like a group of friends just walked out of Spirit Halloween after getting drunk. There is a funny humor at the simplicity of this style. At first, it's hard to adjust to the amateur production design and basic-looking characters, but as we start to dive into the story and really get to see Steve Lemmy's Quasi character progress a little more, it earned our interest. Lemmy does a fantastic job at making Quasi likable, even though the design is absolutely ridiculous. It's like the filmmakers are playing tribute to Monty Python in a way, because we get this feeling from the start to the finish, and this might be why the film holds itself back from really going for the home run in its punchlines from the jokes. The jokes are a hit or miss. Most of the time, we're just getting 90 minutes of dad jokes, but we can't help but get the feeling that after a joke is delivered, on how much further they could have taken it. I mean, we are talking about a hunchback that is ordered to kill a king and a pope with an attraction to the king's wife. Given that synopsis, I don't know if Broken Lizard wanted to hold back the humor to avoid any throwback, but as the movie progresses, they have earned some risque jokes by the innocent intent of telling their story. Most of the cast can already feel which jokes will land and which ones won't, because the ones that don't really land feel extremely forced. Then as we get into the second half of the movie, the filmmakers tend to overcomplicate the plot and try to do too much too quick, and especially with how simplistic the film should be. And that takes away from the comedy and fun to try and cover a thickened plot. This is where the film feels unbalanced between the first and second half of the film. And this is where we also see the jokes come to a noticeable halt, and when we do get jokes, they feel out of place. But I will say that the contrasting characters between Quasi, who has the serious and character trait, but adds the amateur look to give the character the intent of what we should see Quasi as in their story's eyes, which is odd, bizarre, and funny. And between our Pope and King, they do the exact opposite with looks of prestige, but utterly amateur but funny personalities. The trio of characters balance each other out quite nicely, and it's amusing when they're on screen together. With all the movies these guys have been in, Quasi by far is one of the weakest installments, but still has its fun, entertaining elements to make it an okay watch if you want to just relax at home and turn your brain off and watch a bunch of friends in costumes from Spirit Halloween tell dad jokes for 90 minutes. It's an okay watch. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The best thing about Quasi is still a bunch of old friends coming together, having a good time making a movie, and when you have the element of energy to it, it's a win both for the movie and the viewer. But in no way will I rate it up there with the previous Broken Lizard films. I'm giving Quasi 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. Until next week, do me a favor, make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.